Now, for a closer look at Italy's economy and to find out what's really at stake with the upcoming referendum, let's bring in Andrea Montanino. He's director of the Global Business and Economics Program at the Atlantic Council. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening.
Now, Jessica touched on the migrant crisis. We're going to start there. First of all, give us an idea of how the economy is being affected by the migrant crisis, especially since now more migrants are shifting to Italy versus Greece.
Well, the migrant crisis is an issue in Italy for the last, I would say, 10 years at least. So it's nothing really new. We Italians had a lot of people coming from North Africa, Libya, mainly going through some small islands in the south of Italy. Clearly, it's becoming more and more relevant in the last years. There are some estimates on how much it might cost. The estimate that usually people quote is around 0.2% of Italian GDP, which in a way is a ground for battles with Brussels.
Now, in terms of some of the benefits that migrants actually bring into the country, a recent report showed that migrants actually bring in as much to the economy as fiat. So you think, given that context, like how migrants are viewed in Italy, do you think that might change? Well,
they're viewed, I would say, pretty well. I mean, Italy is a country that is always open to others. It's also a country with an aging population. It's among the countries in the world with highest average age. So we need migrants. We need young people coming to the country and work in the country.
So it seems like Italy does have a different take on the crisis. Let's also turn to something else that's obviously weighing on the system. We have the Italian banking crisis. Give us the latest. What are the latest developments in that regard?
Well, I mean, there are rumors and discussion about the recapitalization of this third largest bank, the Monte Paschi di Siena, the bank from Siena. There are a couple of options on the table. Likely, the recapitalization will not be 5 billion euros, as it was said before, will be around 1.5 billion. It's still under discussion how to do it and who will participate.
Now, another thing that we're seeing is this slower growth forecast for Italy. With your initial reaction, what do you think is really holding the country back, if you had to pinpoint a few specific factors?
I would say Italy needs simplification. It needs that making business becomes easier, and also needs an attitude for risk. So I think the government is taking important measures in the last draft budget law and trying to push for investment into companies in order to make their business more viable, more, I would say, modern, more technological, and therefore to create more jobs.
And speaking of investment, obviously we have this big referendum coming up on these reforms. Now, the US ambassador in Rome told reporters that if Italians reject these reforms, he said it would be a step backwards for foreign investment in Italy. How serious is that link between what happens with the reform and the investment prospects for the country?
Well, clearly, Italy is a country that needs still a lot of reforms. And I think foreign investors look at these reforms to decide whether or not to invest in the country. So the referendum will be a step in the direction of reforms, an important step, because it's an important reform that is embedded in the referendum. So I think the ambassador, I would not say he used these words. I was there actually when he said this in Rome. But it's true that foreign investors want to see the Italian government to continue in this process of reforms, and therefore they hope that the government will win the referendum.
And you mentioned that this is a step. What are perhaps some other steps that could be taken to really shore up Italy's economy?
As I said, I think making it simple, reduce bureaucracy, red tapes, but also to find different ways to handle Europe in general. As Prime Minister Renzi said today to President Obama, he wants to fight in Europe, to make Europe more competitive, to make Europe more have more solidarity, and also to really have a Europe that is able to compete with the United States, with China, with big players in the world. Europe needs to change for that.
And just quickly, are there any concerns you think that people aren't really talking about that Italy should be aware of going forward that could really help shore up the economy?
Well, I think the biggest concern is really whether Europe will survive after the French election and the German election next year. This is the big question mark for Europe and therefore for Italy.
Certainly something all of Europe will be keeping an eye on. Well, thank you so much for your insights again. Andrea Montanino, Director of the Global Business and Economics Program at the Atlantic Council.